Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Dimes Buckets podcast. Lots going on this week, lots to get into, and let's get into it.
It's a ticket for the championship.
Joining me as always is Greg, and Greg, you're not as always, but I think we've over the last little while anyway, we've all had our time off. Unfortunately, Dave can't be with us today, but Greg is back. So back from last week, and you just knew. You can see by his name, you knew after what happened to the Lakers last night and the beatdown that they took from the Clippers that he was going to be here. That he was going to be here to let us know.
Just loving it so much. Just loving the fact that like everyone just hates us, and I don't care. Lakers fans so much hate the Clippers because they're such an irrelevance, but we beat them 3 times this season without our best player, and then twice in the last week without our 2 best players. And I'm going to say arguably without our 3rd best player because Norman Powell's been injured as well with his foot injury. So basically our rotation team beat the All-Star Lakers without Anthony Davis, which is just love it. It's just so sweet.
The Lakers are just so bad. It's just incredible. It's incredible how bad they are. And it does look
the fit to be this bad. I thought the fit was bad with Russ, but I didn't think it would be this bad. Like they might not make the playoffs. Which, if you said at the start of the season that the Lakers won't make the playoffs, and that going into the off season they could be looking to trade AD, then
Lakers fans will be celebrating when Westbrook's an ex-Laker too. It seems like you never thought that. Like it's, and you look at around the league, like, so how they had to construct this roster, and you look at you look at what Brandon Ingram is doing elsewhere. You look at what Lonzo Ball is doing elsewhere. You look at what Alex Caruso was doing, obviously before the injury, and how well he was playing. Like, Lakers fans must be looking around the league and just like in their hair thinking, what did we give up to construct this roster? Like it's incredible.
Yeah, LeBron got greedy. LeBron got greedy and thought he needed that 3rd star, but now they're stuck because Westbrook's going to opt in because no one's paying him that money if he enters free agency. So Westbrook's going to, and then they need to get rid of him. And then even if they do, who do they get rid of for John Wall? Do they drop him for a 2nd round pick or something just to like a team with cap space just to sort of get him off the books? But
that's it. Like you just have a
team with 43 million in cap, and there's not a lot of teams that are like that.
So many bad contracts on that team, and you're right. That's going to be the problem. It certainly starts with Russ Westbrook. Right. Well, it'd be interesting to keep an eye on and see what happens in terms of how things play out for the Lakers. It's not certainly not looking good for them, but you never know. We'll see what happens, see if they can turn it around. But I mean, with 20 games left in the season, like it just starts to get to the point where if it's not happening now, then it's definitely not going to happen for them.
Yeah,
right off
the I think they're 10 games off of the 6th seed, off the 7th seed. Sorry, I think they're 10 games off. Off of Denver, who I think are the 7th seed, which is if it with 20 games left, you're not turning that around. If they're going to make the playing game, you're imagining they're going to be in that 9th versus 10th seed playing game, and then they've got to not only go through who is the 9th or 10th seed, but they've got to go through the winner of the game of the 7th and the 8th seed. So, or the loser of the 7th and the 8th seed.
Even as with LeBron, like you just can't see them getting past the Suns or the Warriors at this point. The Grizzlies are 20 games over 500. They're playing pretty well this season.
I don't think they get past the Pelicans at this point.
Yeah, like it's just
it's crazy. Do you think they will trade AD? Do you think they'll?
I think at this point, after this season, I think they'll try. Certainly, it hasn't panned out. I mean, even in the championship season, like he hasn't been the dominant star that he was in New Orleans at any point that he's been there with the Lakers. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see what happens. But you touched there on the Pelicans a few minutes ago, mate, and I guess we might as well move on to the Zion Williamson situation and what's going on with that, because it's turning to what appears to be like just an absolute mess. Mm-hmm. Before we do go there, Rach is in with a comment. Evening all, and the Lakers are falling apart. Yes, they certainly are. And
absolutely are.
Rach, it's kind of, you know what, take a break and just, you know, recharge today, because it's kind of good maybe that you and I aren't on here together today because of what happened last night with our Raptors and the Dwayne Casey curse that's still alive. The voodoo, the elixir, the voodoo magic that our former coach of the year has over us.
He absolutely loves playing the Raptors.
I don't know what it is. But the game had everything. There's just an absolute. I know. I love Case. I can't say I hate him. I love Case, but I don't know what it is. Like, it was just crazy last night. Nick Nurse got ejected, and then all of a sudden the Raptors finished the game on this 34-18 run, but just weren't able to. You get down 17, and it's just too much to pull back. So take it easy, Rach. Just live in the comments, live behind the scenes today, and obviously the Raptors snatch tonight against the Magic. But back to New Orleans and Zion Williamson, and you know, you look at what's going on with him. He's had the injury. Coach Van Vliet, yes indeed. Zion's had the injury, and you know, he was rehabbing away from the team. He's been injured more than he's played. And then footage came out a couple weeks ago or 10 days ago of him rehabbing, where he was actually in New Orleans. And you know, it's not to comment about anybody's weight or anything, but I think that there's a responsibility as a professional athlete to maintain your body and to maintain yourself. And you know, you could clearly see that he had certainly added some body mass that necessarily, I don't know if the Pelicans, he's already a large guy as it is. And I'm not sure the Pelicans will have been happy with that, if his teammates will have been happy with that. And then you had JJ Redick over here on ESPN talking about how, you know, he's not a great teammate. You know, that he's very to himself, and that he's a young guy in the league, and he's really sort of segregated himself from his teammates. Yeah. And a lot of speculation that he doesn't want to be in New Orleans. So Rach touching there, same thing happened with Luke at the start of the season in terms of his fitness and his weight. Yeah. It's a good comparison. But what's your thoughts on the Zion situation?
Well, obviously his team came out, or he came out earlier on in the season, or maybe at the end of last season, said he did want to be in New Orleans. So something's not lining up, whether it's sort of what he's saying or how he's acting. And I think the Pelicans have tried to. They obviously made the trade for CJ McCollum to build around Zion. Like, they want to win, they want to make playoffs, they want to go deep in the playoff series and see what they can do, because that team's perfectly capable with Brandon Ingram, with Zion and CJ and Valanciunas. Now, you would think they should be good enough to sort of make runs in playoff series and then go deep in playoffs. But I don't know, like you say, Jay described him as a distant teammate or something like that, or
something to that effect, where he's sort of
detached teammate.
That's it. Yeah, detached.
Yeah. Which is, you can be a detached teammate. You can show up, play basketball, go home. Yeah, like that's what Kawhi. Apparently, that's what Kawhi's like. He shows up, plays basketball, goes home. He's not one for really like it, and then it's a whole thing with Kawhi, isn't it? That he doesn't talk, or that he's not allowed, and things like that. But he's just sort of zoned in. But I feel like you sort of earn that status. From when you're a young guy, and it's always been strange with Zion at New Orleans. Obviously, I don't think any player with this level of hype has come in and not delivered due to injury. What we've got to say, it's due to injury that he's not delivered, and that he's not played as many games. Yeah. Since sort of you're talking about comparisons, it'd be like Greg Oden. Like, that's who you'd be looking to compare him to, someone with all the talent in the world, but he just can't. He can't seem to stay fit, or he doesn't want to stay fit, or I don't know. It just seems there's always been a circus following Zion from the start, And maybe I don't think he'll sign the rookie max. I think he'll enter restricted free agency early. And then obviously that'll open up to enter unrestricted free agency later on. But whether the Pelicans trade him or not before then, who knows? But I can't see him re-signing any sort of contract. Who would take him? Where does he want to be? That's what needs to be. Because I imagine if he wants to be in LA, I imagine the Lakers would probably take him. If he wants to be in New York, you would imagine the Knicks would definitely try and make a play for him.
That's sort of the rumor out there, isn't it? That he wants to be back in New York and he wants to be in the New York area. But
if there needs to be clarity on where he wants to be. If he doesn't want to be in New Orleans, then okay, then you can still come out and play hard and keep yourself, like you say, keep yourself in shape, keep yourself fit, keep yourself healthy, and just not sign the contract.
Well, you touched on it. Yeah. What you just spoke to there, mate, about the professionalism, and you touched on his the comments again by JJ Redick that he's a detached teammate, and also with that was CJ McCollum. I think it was like it had been like a week or so or 5 days after he had been traded,
spoke to him.
And he hadn't spoken to him, and you just like you touched on there, like you don't necessarily have to hang around with all your teammates. You don't have to be good friends with all your teammates. But you still have to be a good teammate. There's going to be cliques in every change room, in every dressing room. There's going to be cliques in terms of players that hang out with different players. But to trade for a new player and then sort of, your star player who's out injured hasn't even reached out to that player to introduce himself and say, do you put that down to the fact that Zion is just a young guy and he's still learning, and because he's been injured, he hasn't had these veterans around him to guide him and tell him? Or do you just put it down to that's just unprofessional behavior and he should know the way to conduct himself?
I think exactly that. I think it's unprofessional. The guy's not stupid. Like, he's clearly very talented in terms of a basketball court. He's been in a basketball environment for sort of as long as you can remember. You know exactly how you're meant to act when you get new teammates and things like that. And the fact that he didn't speak to him probably speaks exactly why he didn't want to be. Like, if he doesn't want to, like, that was the thing to me, the fact he hadn't spoken to him. But so he clearly doesn't want to be there because Zion's got to recognize that this trade was made for him. There's no other reason to make this trade. The trade was made to build around Zion and to show Zion that the Pelicans were serious. And there's no, like, that's it. And all that, like you say, you didn't have to be best friends with him. No one was expecting that, but to reach out to him and talk to him and be like, welcome to the team and things like that's the bare minimum. You sort of expect that at any sort of level. You would expect the G League players to welcome McCollum to practice and stuff like that. Yeah, that's exactly that. Yeah, I agree with Rach. I think he thinks he's too good for them. I think when he was traded, I just think he had that air about him that he just thought he was too good. And maybe he comes across as someone that's obviously always been such a high level above everyone else. Like, he was so far and away, obviously doesn't look great in hindsight now, but he was so far ahead of Ja Morant in terms of who was going to go overall number one. Everyone knew it was going to be Zion. He seems like he's always been the guy everywhere he's been. And now he's coming to the league and it's like, but you're not the only guy in this league. You might think you're the guy in this team, but every single pro player here has a bit about them, can play, can defend, can score. And I just think he might have been a bit of a culture shock for him that he doesn't want to. Basically, he was quite happy to coast and sit and be comfortable. And now he's been told to push himself and make that next level. And like, you want to be a superstar, this is what the work ethic you need. I just don't think he does that. And maybe he needs a veteran around him to do that, but that's exactly why you would trade for someone like CJ McCollum. You're talking about someone that wasn't sort of a high draft pick and someone who's really was a second starter, Dame Lillard, in a bad Portland team, really. And that was the type of player you'd have around him. Put your arm around him, being like, okay, you're talented, you're immensely talented, but you need to put in the work. And that's just what he needs. And I think whether he wants to be in New Orleans or not, I'm not sure. I'm not convinced he'll sign any sort of contract to stay there. And I think if New Orleans are smart and he doesn't do that, they should trade him. Because they still get a good package for him because they've still got all that potential.
Right. Well, we looked at it from a New Orleans point of view. Let's look at it from other team in the league point of view, the
Mhm.
Knicks, say for example, you got this highly talented player
Yeah,
with this enormous frame. Like he's a big man.
it's huge. Yeah,
He's a huge individual. I can speak to it because he played at Duke.
Nice.
RJ Barrett played at Duke, and
Yeah.
when they came, I saw them come play here. So I've seen Zion in the flesh. He's a massive, massive individual.
Yeah.
But he's also had these injuries, and when you look
Yeah.
at the nature of and knee injuries, and when you look at the nature of the game of basketball and the impact that your joints are going to take when you're going up for rebounds or when you're playing above the rim, like we know Zion can play.
Yeah.
What kind of red flags are there for other teams to, give this guy a substantial long-term contract off the back of these injuries? He's a young guy now. He's got these injuries, these other issues that have started to creep up, and things that you're starting to hear from around the league with his professionalism.
Yeah.
And just as a total package, how do you see other teams evaluating this when he is available or in terms of a trade?
It's a massive risk, but for a team like the Knicks, they've got to do it. If he becomes available and they've got the assets and they think that, but like the team, they've got the Knicks. Every fan of the Knicks thinks they should be back, sort of playoff contending. It doesn't leave them many choices. There's not very often a player with the talent that Zion has becomes available for a trade when he's not making $40 million. And that's what else is going to be different about it is it's not going to be a case of like if the trade does happen, it's not going to be a case of sort of like making up money because he's not going to be on a supermax. He's not going to be on a max contract. He's not going to be coming off $35+ million. It'll have to actually be smart moves and sort of what fits the team's going to. But I think with these injuries, the biggest red flag is the fact that he's putting on weight and that he's a heavier guy and he doesn't want to get fit because it's just going to put more pressure on his knees and things like that. I think if he was injury prone and he had that attitude, but he was in the gym, getting fit, working hard, I think you could probably look past it all. Yeah. I think maybe as a whole package, it's a lot of red flags. But I feel like the team like the Knicks would take the risk. I feel like that there's other teams in the league as well that would probably take the risk. The Magic, for example, if they got the chance, they'd take the risk.
The Lakers for sure, I think would.
The Lakers would definitely take the risk. Well, they can't get worse, can they?
They
can't fall much further. So, it's got to be calculated risk. Like I say, I think if he gets healthy come the end of the year, obviously he won't play this season. I can't imagine. The Pelicans have not set a date from when he's going to apparently had another surgery or something like that on his foot.
Yeah.
If he does get healthy in preseason and he does show that he's working hard and he is trying to get fit and play at a top level and he's still a detached teammate, I think you get away with that and you get a lot more interest and obviously the package will be higher. But as a total package just now, it's just not looking good for either side.
Right. Well, that's a good discussion there on Zion. And from a player that there's question marks on Zion, we go to a player who there's no question marks about. Let's get into Ja Morant and what's going on with this man and what he's been doing over the last little while. Up now to 27.6 points. Averaging 27.6 points this season, 6.6 assists, 5.9 rebounds. Just having an incredible season. 52-point game of the night. Ridiculous dunk on Jakob Poeltl.
So good.
Like Ja he's just out here catching bodies every night. It's just insane what he's doing. And so what do you think? Like what, is the sky the limit for this guy? Like he just seems to be getting better and better. Yeah. He seems to be ticking all the boxes in Memphis. He's a good teammate. His teammates speak very highly of him.
They do.
We talked about some of the maybe issues that are going on with Zion in New Orleans. It seems to be the complete opposite of what is going on in Memphis and the way he's galvanizing this team and has them 22 games over 500, playing exciting basketball. What are your thoughts on Ja?
I love him. I think he's great. I think he should be an MVP candidate. I think ridiculous the people talking about LeBron's an MVP candidate for the 9th seeded Lakers, and it's like Ja Morant isn't. He's the top scorer, the best player. He's just like a human highlight reel just now. Over this last sort of stretch of 12, 14 games, he's been so good, and he does more than just sort of like he brings others into play as well. I think he works so well off the pick and roll with Steven Adams. I think he's had a time in Memphis that he couldn't even imagine, because I don't think he was great in New Orleans, and I think when he got traded to Memphis, I wasn't quite sure how that would work, but I think he's been so good for that team. But I think he's brilliant. I agree. I think the sky's the limit. I would love to see him. And he's got that air about him, the way Desmond Bain talks about him. I listened to his podcast on his talk on the JJ Reddit podcast.
Yep.
The way everyone seems to talk about Ja Morant is just that, like, he's happy to be there. He wants to build something there, and that's his team. He feels like it's his team. So he's the best player, but he's not to the point where he's arrogant about it. He knows that he needs the other guys there as well. I would just love him to see. You think he's eligible for the max this season? Is that right? Yeah, because he was 2020.
I believe he is.
2019. Yeah. So he's eligible for the max this season. So he's obviously going to sign that. And then it's a case of trying to build that team around him, because he is a genuine future MVP candidate. Like, he's so good and he's so fun to watch. And I think in terms of exciting young guards upcoming, the NBA is probably in the best state it's ever been. If you look just past that in terms of this, you got like Josh Giddey, who's having the sort of season that you're like, in the future, if he carries that on and he gets into the flow. But I think it's so good. I think that, and the fact that he's dragged that Memphis team up to the level that they are, just 22 games over 500 they are.
Yeah.
Is that the third seed?
Third place. Yeah, third place.
Third in the West in a very competitive Western Conference. It didn't look like it was going to be competitive at one point, but very competitive Western Conference. Third best team. One of the best teams to watch in the league. I just absolutely love him. I think he's great.
Yeah, it's been absolutely incredible. And if you look at the Grizzlies, they have the best net rating in the NBA since November 25th. A lot of that is down to Ja Morant. So that's incredible. I suppose where people will ask question marks is, he's doing this in the regular season. We know that sort of with his game, it's sort of tailored to these highlight reel plays where he likes to get out in transition. He likes to get into the paint and get to the rim. In the playoffs, when the game starts to when teams start to really clamp down the defense and things start to tighten up, and the game really slows down to a lot of half-court sets, transition seems to, as much as teams want to play in transition, it seems to maybe die up a little bit in the playoffs. Do you think this guy can do it? Like, would you consider, with what's going on with the Grizzlies, would you consider them a title contender? Or do you think he can do this for 4 straight series and take this team possibly to the NBA Finals?
I don't know if they're a title contender yet. I think the team's very young. And not just young in terms of age, but young in terms of experience, apart from Steven Adams, like experience at that level. So I don't think this year, no. I think they could definitely win a series. And if they were to get through to someone like the Warriors or the Suns, I could definitely see them take a game maybe. But you're right, when you're in against the Suns and suddenly the paint's clogged up by DeAndre Ayton and you've got a all-defensive team sort of level, Chris Paul guarding you, and you've got Miles Bridges, who seems to have the longest wingspan in the NBA, and suddenly there isn't that space to sort of move in and get to the rim and things like that, then it could get hard. But I wouldn't count them out. I wouldn't say Ja Morant's not going to win games for them. I wouldn't say Ja Morant is going to average 10 points per game in the playoffs, because I do think he's that good, and the best players tend to adapt. So it might just be exactly that this year for the Grizzlies. It might be a learning year and an adaptation. Like go into the playoffs, win a series, and then if you get put out to someone like the Warriors or the Suns, learn from it, build in free agency, make a couple of trades if you can, build around Ja, see what can happen, and they've definitely got potential there. With how young the team is, I think it's so moldable. Desmond Bain talked about that as well. Is it because they're so young, they don't have bad habits. Or they don't have habits of a lot of experienced guys where it's just all fall into place because we know how this, like they have to, it's all learning, and they seem so moldable, and they just seem like they're really enjoying it. So I'd really like them to I think they'd come. I think they could win a series, especially against one of the lower seeds, get someone like Denver or something like that. I think they'd probably beat the Clippers as well. I think the way they stretch the floor probably defeats the Clippers without sort of Paul George and Kawhi. But yeah, I would love to see them win a series. If they won it, that would be crazy. But yeah, right now I just want Ja Morant to be like acknowledged as like an MVP candidate. Would be brilliant because he's going through. I think he's going through a better run now than what Steph was going on earlier on in the season.
He really has been incredible.
It's been amazing to watch.
You know, he's an incredibly athletic player. Like we all know, athleticism carries you a long way in the NBA. But like, what do you think it's down to? Like his the sort of taking his play to the next level. I think that's just down to like confidence, or do you think that's the work that he's been putting in?
Yeah, I think it was the work. I think
both.
Yeah, I think it's the work. I think he's probably slightly still pissed that he wasn't the number 1 overall pick, and I think he's. Yeah. I think maybe it's been a sort of maybe a chip on his shoulder to be like, no, I am. I was worthy of being that number 1 overall. I'm going to show you guys. And he was drafted to Memphis, and people have never really expected anything in Memphis. So he seems to really put the team on his back, and he's like, no, we're going to show you. And I think he's enjoying working with all the young guys. Like I think he's probably benefiting from the team being young as well. I think he's in an environment where he can make mistakes and learn from it. I think if he was in a team, I know we talk about them a lot, but I think if he was in a team like the Lakers with the experience of someone like Westbrook and LeBron, and there's a lot less opportunity to make those mistakes because you have a lot less of the ball, you have a lot less of the opportunities. So then when it comes to crunch time and suddenly, you've got to take the game-winning shot, or you've got to make the play or play make at the end of the game, you don't have that chance. Whereas I think because he's had the ball in his hand for so long, because he's the driving force of that team, he gets the opportunity to make mistakes. And okay, if it doesn't come off, it's fine. No one expects anything of the Grizzlies. The thing is, if we're sat here this time next season and they're in the same place, the expectations
Such a good point.
Up. Yeah. The expectations are completely up. There's no pressure on them just now because no one expected them to sort of be here. I didn't think they were going to be third in the West at all. I think probably most people would have had a maybe fifth or sixth, maybe playing game sort of level for the West. But yeah, I think they've been so good. But yeah, I think this year is basically a free hit for them. Go and enjoy it. And I think touching on this Desmond Bane thing again as well, I think he touched on that as well. He's like, when they go to places like Milwaukee or they go to the Nets, because it was just after the Nets game where they beat them, and he's like, no one expects it. Like no one expects them. So the literally the talk in the room in the changing room before the game is like, just go out there and play. And they do, and they play, and they look like they're enjoying it. And like I think because they get the opportunity to make mistakes because they don't have that pressure, they're going to be a better team for it. Whereas this time next year, if they're in the same position, and they get into a playoff series, and you're sort of like you're contenders.
Yeah, you're right. It'll be interesting. It's such a good point. It's going to be interesting to see what happens next year because it's sort of a double-edged sword in a way, I guess. As your success, as you succeed more, the expectations sort of go up, don't they? So whereas this year, if it's like, right, 20 games over 500, we're third in the West, awesome. Next year, it's okay. Now we're going to win a playoff series.
Yeah, exactly.
And then now it's Western Conference Finals. Like it's
and people want you to fail as well more.
Yeah.
This time next year, there'll be a lot more people hoping for the Grizzlies to fail, and that's when the team's got to take that next step. And that's maybe why I think they'll get a little bit more experience next year. If they do well in the playoffs this year, I certainly think they'll go try and get more experience next year because the same thing sort of happened with Giannis with his first playoff series.
Yeah.
And there was no expectation on the Bucks. They obviously made the playoffs, did well. And then suddenly all the expectation was on it and people want to see Giannis fail. Yeah. So it's going to be a test of character as well. But in terms of basketball ability, pure basketball ability, Ja Morant is capable of being MVP of this league.
I was just looking at the that draft class. So it was the 2019 draft, and Zion first, Ja second, RJ third, and then DeAndre Hunter fourth. And if you look at those top four, there's a clear winner. Clear winner in that top four, top five range. So, right. Well, we'll finish off on our last topic before we look at tonight's games in the association. The race for the MVP and the top contenders. And you had just mentioned that Ja has probably played himself into that conversation of whether he's the favorite. Obviously, probably not at this point. And it's a shame because he's having such a terrific season. But you look at some of the players around him, like DeMar DeRozan's having a great season. And then really your top 3 candidates, you would look at it and say, Joel Embiid's probably the favorite at this point. Jokic is having an amazing season again. And Giannis is obviously having a great season. So unfortunately for Ja, he's got these like statistical giants. These 3 giants around him that are just having a tremendous, tremendous season. And for DeMar DeRozan, I mean, the guy's just having this incredible season in Chicago with what he's doing and doing it from the mid-range, which is just incredible as well. And
proper old school.
Proper old school. Before the 3-point line.
But it's amazing what happens when you play basketball happy, isn't it? Like he's suddenly in an environment that he loves, and he's getting to, and he's just playing to the absolute best of his ability, and he's driving that team. But he's been brilliant. It's been really weird, like mid-range madness. He's challenging Chris Paul for like effectiveness at the mid-range.
He needs to get himself he needs just to grow like this massive afro, like 70s afro. And get like the big tube socks and put on a pair of Converse and just like be amazing. But so when we look at the race for the MVP and the top contenders, like who is it? Who would you put as your who's leading the race for you right now, I guess? And then
I think it's Joel Embiid. I think it's Embiid. I think he's so good. I think the fact he's playing without I'll come on to that. I'll come on to that. I think the fact he played so long without a second star and was still that dominant, and James Harden's come in and it worked. Shock horror. James Harden wants to play where he wants to where he is, and suddenly it's good as well, and it's working. And I just think he's deserved. I think he's dragging that Philadelphia team to a level that maybe wasn't expected of them right at the start. I mean, people would have probably said the Nets were gonna be the very top team in the East. I think they'll win the East personally. I think they will catch Miami. I think they're 4 games off? Is it 4 games? Yeah.
I believe
they're
so.
4 games off Miami. And I just think he's been so good. And I would be really happy for him because I think he's been through the absolute wars of the last 2 years with every press conference, not being asked about how well he's played, but being asked about the sulking sensation that was Ben Simmons. And sort of, he was he's always been put in this position where it's like, why isn't Ben playing? Why isn't Ben playing? He's like, well, I just put up 50. Why aren't we talking about me? Like, why am I'm literally dragging this team through to the top level of basketball. And in terms of Rach saying Steph, I think if Steph hadn't had that drop off earlier on in the season, was it just after New Year? Was it just after the New Year? Maybe just before he had quite a big drop off. He was shooting quite a low percentage from 3. Then probably. But I think Steph also suffers from the same thing that Giannis is going to suffer from this year. Is like, okay, but you've won it before, but you need to better your numbers. You need to be outstanding. I don't think Giannis will get it because of worse fatigue. He's had it before. I think Steph has set the bar so high for himself that he would genuinely need to be averaging just about 50% from 3 to win MVP again, and that's it. Whereas I think Embiid he's at that level where it's like no one expected me to be this good, but he has been that good.
I think you touched on it there with the Ben Simmons thing too, missing Ben Simmons, but then Steph's had so much. He's been terrific, but he's had help. Andrew Wiggins is having an all-star season, obviously. He's been terrific. So there's a lot of players around Steph that have done really well. And for Simmons to do what he's doing in Philadelphia with the turmoil that's been there all season and the questions they've had to face with the Ben Simmons saga. But talking about Joel Embiid, how does James Harden, when James Harden starts playing for the Sixers, I don't believe he's back yet, but when James Harden is back for the Sixers, how do you see that impacting Embiid's sort of MVP charge here? Is he going to get enough touches to be able to maintain his numbers, or do you see Harden actually? Do you see him having a positive impact on the MVP for Embiid or detracting?
Well, he is back. He's played a few games. He played last night.
That's right. Yeah.
They played together last night and beat New York.
Yeah.
They both put up. Embiid put up 27, 12, and 4, and Harden put up 26, 9, and 9. I think it's a great fit. I think Embiid, because of the type of player Embiid is, and he's so dominant in the paint, Like, he's not a stretch five.
Yeah.
He's not a I'm going to drag you out to even the mid range really that often, or I'm going to drag you out to the perimeter and shoot a three over the top of you. Like, that's not his game. His game is to either like he dominates in the paint, he dominates in that last sort of Shaq range almost, and that's where he's so good. He's so good in the air getting rebounds. So I think there's only so many opportunities that he can score from there, and that's when Harden's going to be the great option to kick it out to, and vice versa. When Harden doesn't feel like sort of taking on two players and then dropping back with like he's got Embiid there. And the way it worked last night looked really smooth. It just looked so good. It looked like they played for months, let alone sort of 2 weeks training. But yeah, I don't think it affects it. I think if anything, it makes it better. It means he's not putting up or having to have the ball in his hand as much, where obviously he doesn't play make, but you know what I mean? Like, he's not having to sort of drive. He's not that only driving force of that offense. And I think it probably works for Harden as well, because Embiid's such a good defender that it sort of maybe makes up for some lulls in Harden's ability to defend, or more so want to defend. But I'd love to see Embiid doing it. It'd be great, because that Ben Simmons thing could have really derailed the season, and no one could have blamed them. If it came out, if like the Sixers, if you were to tell someone, Ben Simmons is going to refuse to play. Every question on everything is going to be asked about Ben Simmons for weeks. That's all the media is going to be interested in. He's going to get traded on the trade deadline to the Brooklyn Nets. And someone told you that at the start of the season. Okay, guess where Philadelphia are sat in the East? You would say, 7, 8? And people wouldn't blame you, because that could completely derail a season. But the fact that he's sort of driven them up, and they're second in the East, and now they've got James Harden coming up to playoff time.
Yeah.
And I just think it's a great little mix. They've timed it really well. Harden looks healthy, happy, seems to fit well. Yeah. It would be nice for Philadelphia and for Embiid if he was to just get it. He deserves it. He deserves it so much.
Yeah, certainly a better partnership than what's forming out west with AD and LeBron, or Westbrook and LeBron, depending on
whatever partnership.
Which one, whatever partnership you want to focus on.
It's not great.
Right. Well, that's a good breakdown of the MVP race there. Can the Sixers do it? Win it all? I think it's going to be tough.
I think the winner will come from the West.
I think it'll be from the West. I think the Sixers, obviously, the power has shifted after the trade deadline in the East, and that the Sixers have a really good shot of getting out of the East. Mm-hmm. But I think it's going to be tough for anybody in the East this year to beat the Suns or the Warriors, to be honest, or Memphis. Even for that, it's going to be tough. But right. So we'll look at this. Let's look at a couple of the games tonight. A couple that stand out, obviously Cavaliers and 76ers at 7 p.m. tonight. Yeah. And me and Rach touched on it last show that the Cavs were reps and 6. There we go. Me and Rach touched on it last show that we thought that the team that the Raptors or teams in the play-in could rein in the top 6 were probably the Cavs. And the Caps just keep losing and keep falling. They're in 6th place now.
Yeah.
So they play the Sixers tonight. The Raptors are also in action against the Magic. So the Raps they're 2 games back of the Sixers. They could pick up a game tonight, and then they play the Cavs on Sunday. So big weekend ahead for those 2 teams for sure.
Yeah.
The Pacers and Pistons are in action tonight. Pistons obviously coming off that win, the win last night against the Raptors.
I know it hurts, but come on, you can say
it. It really stings. I wish I had one of those Men in Black things where I could just tap it and just completely erase these scores from my memory. And then of course, probably the game of the night tonight is the Bucks and the Bulls.
Yeah.
It's going to be a terrific game kicking off here at 7:30.
Mm-hmm.
And then the late games, the Jazz, Pelicans, Rockets, Nuggets, and the Knicks and Suns. So certainly some good games in the association on the docket tonight. Any ones in particular that stand out for you, Greg, apart from based on what we just mentioned?
Yeah, I think the Bills and Bucks is going to be a great game. like that's going to be so good. It's two top teams in the East. I think the Bills are at a point where they maybe didn't think they were going to be. I don't think they expected. Obviously, they don't think they ever expected DeMar DeRozan to have this sort of impact. I don't think they expected Lonzo to fit in so well where he has done either. I just think they've been really good. I think the Bucks will probably still win it, but I think it's going to be a great game. I think the Jazz will run all over the Pelicans. They're doing well. The Jazz are doing sneaky good. They did it last year as well. They were just sort of that sneaky good team, and they always tend to. Last year they did it at the same time. They sort of peaked around sort of mid-March, mid to late March. Really started to peak. Went on a really good run, and built really well in the momentum to get to go into the playoffs. Same thing with Suns Knicks. I think the Knicks are in such a bad run. I think if you were to ask any fan base, do you want the season to end right now? The New York Knicks would jump all over that. Yeah. They need this end of season. They need free agency. They need trades. They need something in that team to just sort of spark them, because they're in a slumber just now, which really isn't fixable. And I'm just having a look at the other games. Oh, your Raptors are on. You're against the Magic.
Yeah, Raptors back-to-back against the Magic. So
yeah, you'll be fine. You should win that. That's a good little pick-me-up. They're not very good, so I'll say that now.
I mean, to come out. I mean, we always touch on the Raptors a bit, but like, obviously with the injuries, Rach touched on it last week that we had the three back-to-backs in a short span, so within like 8 days. Yeah, it's a good point. But
you might play the Lakers. Do you play the Lakers soon? That'll be a pick me up, surely.
Should be an automatic win, right? Everyone wins up against the Lakers these days.
Exactly. It's a free win. It'll be all right.
I think for the Raptors to come out of that with the injuries that they had, and coming out against with the teams that they played, 3-3 in these back-to-backs wouldn't be terrible. Would have been nice to go sort of 4-2 or 5-1, but 3-3 is suitable. 20 games left for a lot of these teams, and you're into a quarter left of the season. So we'll be taking a much closer, going forward, I guess, on the podcast to look at games coming up and sort of the impact that, some of these key games could have towards here as we meander towards the end of the season.
It's going to get close. There's only 2 games separating 13th seed and the 10th seed in the West. So you've got 4 teams really fighting for that 10th spot to get into the playing game. The Lakers could still be caught. I think it's probably, touch wood, I think it's safe to say that the Clippers and the Timberwolves are probably in one of the playoff games. Provided, and obviously a team could absolutely capitulate, which could happen. And both teams have shown that they're completely capable of it happening. Clippers earlier on this season, Timberwolves last season. But the West, the race, I think that's where the really exciting bit of the West is. The top's not exciting, really. The Suns have been so dominant this year. I think the Warriors obviously dropped off. So I don't think that's where the exciting bit of the West lies. Whereas I think with the East is completely different. I think with the East, the exciting bit's right at the top. And sort of the lower down seeds is less exciting. So there's definitely about 20 games to go-ish. Yeah. Some teams have less than 20.
Yeah, 20.
And then it'll be
quarter of the season.
And then it'll be playoff time, which is when basketball gets serious. Yeah. which is
100%.
Which is great. That's just the best time for basketball.
And also this month, obviously kicking off, folks, which we'll try to, depending on what time is for everybody, and availability of guests or whatnot, to try to do some sort of NCAA tournament, look ahead and break down and
it's March Madness, isn't it?
So March Madness is upon us. 4 days, the first 4 days of the tournament, I'll tell you right now, if you're just getting into basketball, the first 4 days of March Madness are like Christmas Day for basketball fans. It's 4 days of games, 12 hours, upsets galore. You've got like these small college teams that upset some of these big major college teams and their stars. It's just a terrific tournament. Lots of traditions. My tradition is just a ginormous pot of chili for 4 days and a case of beer, and just
that sounds fantastic.
Let's just sit back and watch 4 days of basketball and roll me up the stairs when it's done. So
Great.
So
I think
so
we
we'll
actually
be
get it on the
terrific.
TV in the UK now because that wasn't a thing a couple of years ago. But we actually do get NCAA basketball on the TV now.
Perfect. It is March, so I've got my Duke basketball shirt on. So
Is that
I'm
who's winning it?
already, yeah. That's hopefully the Dukies are there. Good young team. Obviously, Adrian Griffin, the son of assistant coach on the Raptors.
Yep.
AJ Griffin has had a tremendous season for them. And of
I'm
course,
trying to think who are the
Paulo
ones to watch out for?
Banchero.
Yeah, Paulo Banchero. There's where does Jabari Smith Jr. play? He's a good player. He's a player to watch. He'll be top 4 sort of
for sure
draft pick. You would imagine.
We'll certainly do a NCAA tournament special and give everybody the teams and the players that they need to look out for. And of course, Rach is supposed to be on her way over here this month for a Raptors game. Hopefully, if it happens, we'll see. But that's it for us, folks. Tremendous breakdown today. I think thanks for joining. Thanks for being here again, Greg. On behalf of Rach, navigating our way through the comments. Good times, and we'll see you on the next one.